Welcome back to Chris and Retro. It's been a few days since I've been able to get on here to share with you some information. For those just tuning in for the first time, Chris and Retro, we talk about high risk living and how dangerous it can be, and the unexpected consequences, all those hidden things that can happen to us, and ways to avoid it, ways to address it if it came up. The second thing that we address probably more frequently, is relative to that recovery story. What happens when things have fallen apart, when hope doesn't seem like it's there, and what options do we have? Um, tonight's video is not far removed from that, but it is more of a cautionary tale that I'm going to get into. That's relative to some things that we should really see as hopeful, but they do open up some other layers for those of us in the addiction community. And what I want to do is shed some light on some things that I've seen. My insights, again, I'm no expert. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a counselor. I spent time as a recovery peer advocate, yeah, in an emergency room setting. And so I have a perspective based on that. I also have a perspective based on my own addiction season. But there's some good news that have come out recently, and I've shared on the channel here before. I'm an ambassador with Shatterproof, which is a national nonprofit as part of my work. I'm gonna give them a quick plug here. The reason I believe in them so much is because of what they actually do, and it's all evidence based. I'm in my real life, my career life. I'm in sales, and I believe in our team sells based on data. I also find that dealing with the recovery community based on data, and therein lies a lot of my belief that those two worlds really do have a lot of intersection if we can remove stigma. Well, tonight I'm going to share some positive news and some of the things that at Shatterproof that we are excited about and actually have been advocates for and proponents of legislation and change. So one of the things, and I'll share my screen right away, that's come out. And again, this is going to be a cautionary tale here as I go forward. But this is an article that came out applauding Dr. Gupa and how he's excited about the removal of the X waiver that came up recently in recent legislation. And so what does that mean to you? Well, there was a bill that came out recently, an omnibus that came out, that has a lot of little components in it that I think are going to go a long way to dealing with the opioid crisis, and specifically targeting fentanyl. Um, there's a lot to consider. That we all know how serious it is. It's becoming an increasingly political topic, which I find interesting, because people have been dying across several administrations here for a long time, but apparently now it seems like something people are listening to. I guess enough of the elected officials children are dying enough for them to actually pay attention now, is the only thing I can figure, because a lot of people have been dying for a lot of years with this, and we're finally getting legislation that makes sense. Now, what is X waiver and why does it matter? Well, it matters mainly because now a primary care physician or another physician can actually prescribe you the medically assisted treatment you need to move beyond your addiction. So you don't always have to go to a treatment provider per se to get the treatment that you'd require to be better. An example of that would be Suboxone, which is a real common one. That's common for people that are addicted to heroin and fentanyl. But Suboxone is one where you couldn't get that script unless you went to a treatment provider, and then the treatment provider, if they, based on their availability and the volume of people that they have with those prescribers, they would get you in at your appointment. And if anything went wrong with that prescription anywhere along the line, or you had any challenges along the way, it's tough to get back in front of that person just based on sheer volume alone. What the idea of the X waiver is, it gives more access to prescribing capabilities for something like Suboxone. I don't know all the nuances of it, but I know that they gave more resources to first responders. They also gave more aggressive legal tactics for law enforcement to deal with drug dealers. All good things for the opioid crisis. So my cautionary tale isn't really about this. This is all good news. I'm not a Biden supporter. I don't agree with the administration. However, I support somebody that's involved in his administration that was from New York, named Robert Kent, who is a tremendous individual to the treatment community, has been an advocate for a lot of local work we're doing here. And I just have a lot of respect for him. And so I was excited to see legislation that he was involved in. And I was excited to see Shatterproof get a win and their support of this type of work. There's a lot of work to go. So anyway, that's all positive news. But where things get sideways is really around, actually, I'm going to back up for a second. What a real life example where X waiver matters is one season of my life, I was a peer recovery specialist. And basically I was in an emergency room setting as people would come in with substance use disorder related to a severe alcohol event, intoxication that required some kind of a medical, police intervention or medical intervention. But predominantly, it was about half and half, actually. I'd get overdoses, and chronic illness actually related to alcohol was a big one. So my job as a peer was to be there and be eye contact for them in this season when they're in the emergency room, when they're getting immediate medical treatment for a serious medical condition. And my job was to help them have options and to present to them, you know, a relatable story so that we could make eye contact and maybe they would trust me in that moment so we could at least get them one more day and then maybe one more day and then maybe one more day. But the whole point, trying to get them into treatment and get them better. One of the limiting factors without this X waiver is that if you had somebody coming in that had, we had one case one time where a person came in from another state. They just moved back in the area. There was some kind of an issue, you know, in their personal life that they had to come back now. And this patient was having some serious problems medically as a result of withdrawal. And the withdrawal was coming from not being on Suboxone. And so one of the problems was we had to jump through hoops to find a way to get this person the prescription they needed because this X waiver law was still in place, and there was nobody really at that time of night that could do that. So that was back several years ago, but that was my firsthand account of how that can be really handcuffing when this person, by all means, should have had it, by all means, can have it, and was not, you know, seeking anything sinister, was just trying to deal with a situation that based on her personal life had fallen apart and she was moving back to another area. So that's an example of where this can be really beneficial. Here's the problem. And this is something that I want to make sure that I call out. So we always talk about stigma. I mentioned shatterproof, and shatterproof is really formed based on stigma. We're trying to eliminate stigma so that people actually can get better. Now, stigma sounds, I think, going into it at face value, for a lot of us old farts like me, you know, we think of stigma as just, you know, I think a lot of people think of it as whining, you know, excuses, whatever. Candidly, I really do. I think others put stigma on people because it's such a complicated problem and it really hasn't touched their personal life that they're aware of yet. So they put a box around it, don't deal with it, and allow limitations to stay because it really isn't a pressing issue. And as long as those boxes are there, I don't really have to do anything with it anyway. So I find that to be troubling, but it really is our reality and how we live for a lot of us in recovery, especially if you are a female with an opioid problem. If you're a female and you have an addiction problem related to opioids or anything that's heroin or fentanyl or anything, boy, are you going to go through a dance if anything goes wrong with your script. So stigma is always there. It's always there. I can't tell you how many different angles it's gone through, and I've experienced it for myself, and I've experienced with my partner Sam, and you know the stuff that she goes through. And boy, is it real. And we have to go the extra mile just to get basic health care sometimes relative to that. So here's where the issue comes in. This X waiver is good news. It opens up opportunities. So for an area, we have an outstanding psychiatrist that treats a good portion of the clients in a large treatment agency here in Western New York. And I think he does an absolutely excellent job with an unbelievable work volume. He looks at his patient. He's the epitome to me of patient-centered practices. He actually hears what's going on. He doesn't do cut and paste options, but he prescribes based on what this client needs and what he can do to help that person move forward. What happens is many times, and we found this out the hard way this week, many times he can send over a script that's an adjustment, and that script can be rejected by the pharmacy because they don't agree that it should be prescribed based on a client's or patient's history of prescriptions. So if a psychiatrist or anybody that's qualified medical doctor sends through a secure medical system to a pharmacy, and that pharmacy receives that script, they have the option to deny it. Now, I can understand having the option to deny a handwritten script that was handed to you because there's all kinds of fraud that could potentially be there. And I would understand being leery with that, especially with all the lawsuits that have gone around naming around the opioid crisis. That did bring in Walgreens and CVS into that lawsuit. So I can understand being cautious. But when a medical doctor, a prescribing medical doctor, especially one of the most prominent ones in the area, sends in a script, you have really no unless it's a pure God complex and you feel that you know more about addiction medicine, given the fact that you fill pills for any number of disease states, that one is one you decided you don't fill. That's a problem, a real problem, and one that I don't stand for, and actually making a bit of a stink about it. And I will now. So one of the offenders of that actually did this weekend, and I don't know if it's showing up on your screen or not. It doesn't look like it is. Let me just try to stop sharing here, and I will share again. because I got to do the drum roll. Nope. Yep. Here we go. And there it is. Rite Aid Pharmacy. We were situation with a script that was necessary. We're told that they could fill it, but they choose not to fill it, which was interesting. And I'll explain that in more detail later, because it was actually a problem of their own creation, and they forgot about their problem of their own creation. So I want to make sure Rite Aid got a free shout out and some free advertisement on my show. It's a small little channel, but hopefully someday we can go back on this and harken back and say, remember the good old days when this Rite Aid shout out didn't matter as much, and now it actually matters a lot. You won't see me crap on a lot of brands a lot, but when I saw what I felt like was egregious violation of what their rights, patient rights and law was, I felt like Rite Aid should get a shout out. So back to my point. So here we have a construct where we've got a doctor that the X-waiver thing doesn't really factor into because he already had the right to prescribe a medication. That medication falls within what this X-waiver has now been removed to. So a medically assisted treatment like a Suboxone was is prescribed by a medical doctor. That's sent to a pharmacy, and the pharmacy has the right to reject based on their view of a patient chart, not even a patient chart, their view of prescribing history at their location from the same doctor with the same patient over a season. So that's the first thing. So now here's where my concern comes in. The X-waiver removal intended to be great. So this particular prescribing doctor or other prescribers don't have inundation of work and lowered service levels for the clients and patients. So the point is more access. So if I have 200 patients all going to the exact same physician, you can imagine how difficult it would be to have that schedule work and have people meet their needs when they meet it, and many of them going into crisis on any number of days. That's a problem. We now shift this across any prescriber can prescribe medically assisted treatment. Now, in theory, that would really relieve the workload and provide more access to those that are struggling. That's the theory. Here's the real problem. If I go to a regular primary care physician, and I can think of a few in the area here that would be resistant to understand the sense of urgency with prescribing anything to do with opioids. So if they're resisting and they're taking days messing around, or maybe in fact refusing to, and forcing somebody that's got to go to another primary care physician and then go through all the rigors of maybe not even being accepted there, only to have this prescription sent through to a Rite Aid or another pharmacy that says, no, they're not going to fill it. They can fill it, but they just choose not to. You can see the problem. It's all based on perception. It's based on worry about legal liability. There's a whole pile of crap that's going on with this thing. With it, a well-meaning piece of legislation is going to go out. And now I've seen firsthand pharmacies make a pharmacist within Rite Aid made a decision by themselves to not fill a patient's prescription because they decided that they weren't going to do it. Now, in Rite Aid's defense, they have other employees there that actually know the law. They know what they can and can't do. And we revisited that pharmacy a second day face to face with a pharmacist that actually understood the rules. But the gyration was we actually had to go to 3 locations to get to the same pharmacy and get the advocacy we needed to walk into that pharmacy, to tell them that they have to release the online script that was sent over, only to be told that we had to go back to the prescriber and have the prescriber call them and say that they could fill the script. Do you follow what I'm saying here? The prescriber sent the script in. 3 days later, we're still jerking around with a pharmacist, and that pharmacist, we had to go to a separate pharmacist in the exact same organization. And because of the notes of the previous pharmacist, we had to go back to the prescribing physician and have that person send it again, or call them and say, yes, you can release it. Yes, you can release something I've already sent you to release. So that another pharmacist in the same organization could release that medication. I think that's odd, but what do I know? I'm just a big dummy, but I'm irritated. So I start thinking about this and I start getting troubled because, the work, that was just put out here, this change in legislation, the moves that are being made to give law enforcement officers more to crack down on with drug dealers, which are the epicenter of a lot of this currently. Um, the tools that are being put out to keep people alive when they're there, and hopefully, see a day where they want to get better. The uh, endless amount of work that's going to make it sure that we can get people to better days. The problem is it does open up more layers. It peels back the onion more. And now we're going to go more and more and more into society and face this stigma more and more. So I guess in this video, what's the point? Well, there's a few things I would like you to do. And I'm also going to give you a little news bulletin here at the end. But one thing is stay involved. So regardless if you have a loved one that you think is using or not using, or in recovery or whatever in recovery, stay involved. It's really in our best interest collectively. I shared some information that came out for the 2021 data on substance use and mental health issues, and it was pretty scary how much trouble the nation's in right now with addiction. I mean, we got a lot on our plate with addiction, and it's really all of our problem, because even if you don't know somebody, somebody that's driving a bus, somebody that's making law, somebody that's teaching your kids, somebody that's wears a badge, driving an ambulance. We know people in all walks of life that are struggling with this. So it really is in all our vested interest to help with addiction. The second thing is hold your prescribers accountable. If you are in a recovery community, hold them accountable, know the law, know your rights. I'm not saying make a stink. There's a way to be respectful and there's a way to address it and know you're sure of what your situation is. To go in and start screaming and have no basis for it is never going to help anybody. In fact, it's going to make sure that the collective of those that are trying to do the right thing get even more stigma put on them, because then they'll all be called drug seeking. When in fact, there are nuances that come up, and I'll explain one that actually what makes a lot of this so baffling. The last thing is, get involved in Shatterproof. They're excellent. And they're not sponsoring this video. This is really Chris's opinion. I just believe in Shatterproof, and I'm talking about them because they're another arm of all this work. They're out there doing some good things. I represent them in certain instances. I'm not now. I just believe in the organization. Check them out. I know a lot of people that aren't really addicted to anything, so to speak, but they are dealing with mental health issues. And one of the things I shared with you, and this is a separate issue, so I'm kind of closing out the other subject, but really the related issue is this. There's a supply issue in some of these things. So, in your mental health medication, many people are prescribed Adderall. Adderall is on back order nationally. There's a problem with supply with Adderall. Now, the stuff being made the right way. So here, if you don't have a close relationship with your prescriber, and you don't have a good pharmacy in connection, there's a lot of people with Adderall prescriptions out there that are really in trouble. And so what are they doing? Well, if they have the close relationship, they're looking for alternatives. Now, if your pharmacist is not co-signing that and sees an Adderall script that they've back ordered, and in the system it looks like there's another script being put at the exact same window of time, that could flag that second script and they could not fill it. They can apparently choose not to fill it. Be aware of that when you're going. Don't cut it close. The other thing is the other option that people do is they'll go cop Adderall off the street. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's not Adderall. In many cases, it's not Adderall. There's a study just came out that came through Shatterproof that 3 out of every 10 Adderall pills, or alleged Adderall pills that are purchased off of the street, are fentanyl. 3 out of 10. Or have fentanyl in them. Synthetics of any kind, you can just pretty much count on having fentanyl in them. If for nothing else, let's just say that it wasn't intentionally put into it as part of administering the manufacturing of that drug. Even cross contamination, if a drug dealer is doing work with the fentanyl and packaging, or doing whatever else they're doing with the other drugs, including weed, cross contamination can put enough fentanyl on somebody who's not used to it enough to kill them. So be careful. This is not an easy issue. It's super complicated. I hope I explain this in a way that's beneficial to you, but the X waiver is good news. Your physicians all can prescribe your medically assisted treatment for those of you that are struggling. If you've got a provider right now that's just backlogged and overworked, just explore your options. Don't go to them and cancel everything, but just go explore, see what you have for options. Make sure you check with whoever it is you're talking to and get a sense of what their attitude is about recovery. What do they believe to be true about it? Do they believe that recovery is real? Do they believe addiction is a mental health issue? Do they believe addiction is actually a disease? Do they think it's just a choice? These are all things for you to make your decision on. Those are questions I would ask, just because that's how I think. And then make sure that, and this is the thing for those in recovery, many do not take your script like you're supposed to. Many have bad days with these mental health issues and take too much of their stuff. Many will go and shortchange their Suboxone or something else because they just screwed up. Own your prescription as if it's your life. It will help you downstream so you don't run into some unnecessary crisis. But at the same time, know that if you run into an unnecessary crisis or you run into a crisis whatsoever, you can't count on the fact just because you had a script that it's always going to be filled. You have to make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's, because that's part of the struggle we have, and it is just reality. I hope this video is helpful for you guys. This is not going to be easy. Nobody ever promised it was going to be. We've got some good news. There's some new options for us out there to get better, for sure. There's some good options out there to start attacking this thing from a street perspective and dealing with the illegality and the distribution. But in the end, it really comes down to what can you do for you today? And some of that is be armed with good information so you know what you're going to face, potential headwinds. And by all means, take care of the things you're supposed to be taking care of relative to your script, your 12-step work, your accountabilities, the jobs you do, the promises you keep and make. What's your mindset? I've talked about that on here. What's your mindset? Are you going forward at any length to get better? What are your action plans? What are you doing? And what are the accountabilities around that to get better? And most importantly, what are those promises that you're not only keeping, you're making promises in the first place. You're putting your toe on the line and having accountability, and you're keeping those promises every single time. You do those things, and you're going to find tremendous success on the other side of it. Recovery is absolutely an option. It's never going to be easy, and it doesn't always feel good. It doesn't always feel good, but we do run into some stuff here, and I will pop off all the time. If I see systematic, stigma, and if I see things in the system that are just wrong, I'm going to use this platform to call it out the best I can. I will try to always be an advocate for hope, but I got to be honest with you. There's not enough voices out there telling people, the companies like Rite Aid, that you need to have consistent policies that are patient-centered, considering everything from our reimbursements all the way down to the doctor's training is about patient-centric behavior. You can't make compliance and legal risk mitigation decisions and have that match up with patient-centric decisions by physicians, especially in the addiction world. There's no cut and paste way to help somebody get better. It's about how are they behaving and the adjustments they have with a good relationship with a good provider. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you tuning in. Please like, subscribe, comment. If you like this video and you find it useful for somebody struggling, or you just want to go fuss about Rite Aid, pass it along. I'd appreciate the support. Thanks again, and stay productive and stay out of trouble.